Hi, Tyll from Fidelity here. In this video, we're going to talk about my review process. The tricky thing about my review process is I have a goal to do a review every week, and I really don't like it when I miss that goal. So I have to really create a step-by-step process that I go through that is pretty precise and pretty well known to me so that I can get it done efficiently. So here's how it goes. The first thing that happens is I open my front door and there's a box on my front door. For example, right now I'm waiting for a Mr. Speaker's Aeon Flow Open headphone, and oh boy, it's going to be full when I open the door and I see that box. The next thing is I open the box and I put the headphones up on my shelf of headphones that I'm waiting to review. And sometimes, like if it was the Aeon Flow, it would jump right to the head of the line. And sometimes it takes a month maybe, or sometimes more, before I get around to a headphone. When it comes time for me to listen, I open the box and I give it a quick listen. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for longer. Expensive headphones, I'll sit down for quite a bit longer when I first get it, because I want to have a clear impression without any biases, or I don't want to measure it ahead of time. I don't want to take a look at what the measurements are, but I'll sit and listen to a headphone for a little while to get my first take on the headphone. This Aston & Kern AK240 is really my go-to device when I need quick listens in a lot of ways. When I go to trade shows, I think it's a great player. Then I measure the headphone. If the headphone is borderline when I have my first listen, it's the measurements that are going to determine whether I just stop right there or whether I'm going to carry on with doing the review. I do the entire review with the measurements in hand, and I think that this biases me to some extent. But if I'm biased by anything, it's the measurements that I want to be biased by. I don't want to be biased by the fact that I've got a cold that day, or I'm feeling a little down, or Dart has chewed up my, Dart's my dog, and he likes to chew cables, and so I don't want to be affected by having to fix my Apple charger cable or something like that, and I just don't feel good. So if I'm biased by anything, I want to be biased by the measurements. Another thing is that mostly when I look at measurements, I'm listening to see what the differences are between the measurements and what I hear. So it's not like I go in expecting the headphone to sound a certain way because the measurements say something. It's more of, I look at the measurements and then I listen to the headphone and I compare what I'm hearing to what I'm seeing on the paper, because I quite often find that what's on the in the measurements is not as doesn't have the same magnitude as what I hear. So I start doing my measurements, and as I'm doing the measurements, I have to move the headphone. There's a lot of steps in there. I bring my laptop into my lab here, and I'll open up a browser window. And this window will remain open for the entire rest of the week as I finish my review. So as I'm doing the measurements, I open a tab for the manufacturer's homepage. I open a tab for the product page. And then I go to open another tab, and I go to the support page and I open up the manual. So now I have the manual up. If the product has been around for a while, I'll search the headphone forums and open up a tab for all the relevant threads. I'll go to HeadFi, I'll go to Headcase, I'll go to Super Best Audio Friends, and I'll go to our Reddit on our headphones on Reddit. So I'll have those open, I'll search for the threads there, and I'll have tabs open for every relevant thread. I'll also open up Amazon and go to their product review pages, and I'll open up a page for the product reviews. from customers. It's very difficult for me if I get a headphone to understand how reliable it is or how durable it is, and I'll be able to get a good idea about reliability and durability from the reviews on Amazon. I won't be able to get much of an impression on sound quality. On the headphone forums, I can begin to get impressions of sound quality, but that's not really what I'm looking for on the headphone forum measurements. So I never open up any tabs for other professional reviews, ever. Because a lot of times they can be very convincing, and that might bias me. So I only read customer reviews and forum reviews, but I never read any other professional reviews. Once the measurements are done, I take my laptop and I put it on my dining room table and I go into the Wall of Fame. I pull off all the headphones that are relevant to the headphone I'm reviewing, the similar type, similar price, and so on and so forth, and I bring them to my dining room table. Then I open a document in BB Edit, which is an editor for HTML that I use to write the article itself before we load it into the tool at the end. And I make a bunch of spaces after the header on top so that I can take my notes near the bottom of the page. Then I do my listening. Listening can take a half a day, maybe a whole day, something like that. Oftentimes this is a little out of sequence because I'll take a headphone and the initial listening, I'll actually use the headphone for a couple of days as I'm doing a review on another headphone. I'll listen to movies at night and stuff like that. But at any rate, as I'm doing my listening tests, I'll write my impressions at the bottom of the page and take my notes of the listening impressions, and so I can build them up. While I'm doing my listening tests, I have a very specific set of tracks that I use all the time. As I said, I don't want to be biased by anything, and so one of the things I do is all my listening tests are always done with exactly the same tracks. These are pieces of music that I am absolutely sick of. And that means that I have this baseline of I am just completely and totally familiar with these tracks, and I am not going to be swept up with emotion because of the music. If I listen to just sort of random pieces of music, I may get all involved in the music and think something is just awesome and great. But I don't. I listen to things that I won't say I don't have any interest in. When I picked the track, I had an interest in it, but mostly the reason why I picked the track because it had something in its character that could tell me something about the response. I listened to Popsicle Toes. Diana Krall Popsicle Toes is interesting because it's a very sparse instrumentation. You have a voice in the middle, you have a bass down low, you have a drum kit that's doing nice soft stuff on cymbals for highs. And then you've got a piano, so you have this nice percussive attack. And so that particular track is really good for kind of picking those things out as separate bits and seeing how well they go together. I listen to Pink Noise. I actually listen to Pink Noise because you can hear very clearly stuff. I listen to Bob James' New York Samba. I listen to Conga Kings. I listen to Crown City Rockers. That one's kind of interesting because it's not a very good quality recording, and I've got a real sense of how much quality there is. There's a Manhattan Transfer track. I don't know if I can find it here quickly. Giant Steps that is a little bright, and I know exactly how too bright it is, and that way when I'm listening I can tell if it's not bright enough or if it's more bright than it actually is. If it was exactly correct on the track, it's actually a little bit harder to tell. Sometimes having a slightly lower quality track allows you to have this sense of exactly where the quality level is. Pinback non-photo blue, well, first thing I got to do is turn down the volume because that thing is maxed out. But it's maxed out just right. It's compressed, but it's compressed just right. It's super dense with bass and guitars and vocals and drums hammering. It's almost like pink noise, where the spectrum is dense and you can tell if something's missing. You can tell if it's warm or if it's cool. You can tell if it's got a peak someplace. And it's just driving. So that's a great track for testing that kind of stuff out. And then there's this really cool track, Santiago Vasquez, Quejas de Bandoneon. It's this really sort of densely instrumented tabla drums and flutes and whistles and big skin drums and accordions and just all sorts of stuff. But the recording is amazing because it has incredible depth and width and a very good specificity of instruments. So I get a lot of information about imaging from that particular track. I love Rickie Lee Jones, and there's a song, Dat Dare, that she does on the Pop Pop album. And the beautiful thing about Rickie Lee Jones' voice is that it's just a little bit, what's the right word? Kind of almost muffled sounding, kind of warm and cottony or something like that. And the amount of that cottoniness helps me listen for the vocal tonality in the upper mid-range and presence region. It's just a lovely track to hear. And then there's this track, Carlos Herrera. There's a couple of them, Chichapen, Buleras. This is a flamenco track, and it's got all this strumming on the guitars and banging and castanets clacking and all this kind of stuff, but it's got no bass, and it's got unbelievable impact. It's just this tremendously dynamic track, but with no bass in it. And a lot of times, if you're listening for how dynamic something is, if it's got a punchy bass, you can be fooled into think it's punchy all across the spectrum. But this particular track is only sort of mid-range and treble. And so if you hear it as being really dynamic and snappy and eye-blinking, then you know then I know that something's got lots of dynamism in it. And I'm not being fooled by the bass on the track. But the bottom line is that some of these tracks I've been using for 20 years to evaluate headphones back when I was with Headroom. So I've got a lot of experience with these tracks, and I'm not going to be emotionally swept up by them. And I know when I found a really good headphone when I do get emotionally swept up in that track. The other thing I have is I have actually a set of 10 to 20 second snippets of these tracks, and sometimes I just listen to the little snippet over and over again because it's the same when I switch headphones from one headphone to the other in comparisons. I'm not listening to a different part of the song on each one. I'm just listening to the same 8 bars or so. So I always listen to the same music that I am incredibly boringly familiar with, and that allows me not to be biased by my emotional attachment to the music. Then I read the manual, and as I read the manual, I'll take all the important bits, what kind of Bluetooth it has, what kind of headphone it is, what kind of cables they have, whether it's noise canceling, so on and so forth. So I read the manual for all the pertinent bits that I'm going to put into the article, and I'll just note them at the bottom of the page, usually above the listening notes. Then I go read all the customer reviews on Amazon and all the threads on HeadFi and Headcase and all the forums. And generally speaking, I'm not really reading them for other people's opinions on sound quality, although I do read the opinions on sound quality and compare them to my notes, but I really go by what I think. I'm more reading it because I can't evaluate the durability of a product because I don't have it for very long. So I rely somewhat heavily on what people say on Amazon, because you'll get a good sense if the headphone breaks on them in a certain way or it's uncomfortable in a certain way. And on the reviews on HeadFi and Headwise and the headphone forums, those guys are good at finding oddities on things. For example, when I did my Skull Candy Aviator review, when I read the Headphone, Headcase, and Super Best Audio Friends threads, somebody said that when they were outdoors and it was windy, that the capsule vent on the top whistled in the wind. And I went, what, really? And so I went out into my garage and turned on one of the box fans and put my head in front of it, and sure enough, the hole whistled. Another one, there's a Sony headphone, and Sony has this funny cable. They use it on a lot of stuff, but when it gets cold, it gets really stiff. And well, it's cold here in Montana, but I was writing the review during the summer. I go, really? And so I took the headphone cable and I stuck it in my freezer for a few minutes and pulled it out. And sure enough, it was really stiff when it was cold. And those are things that, you know, I just wouldn't check, you know, so I don't know. So I think it's really important, if a headphone's been out a while, to take a good hard look at those things. No, it's not original to me, but it's important for the consumer. And so I do try to take a look and be thorough in doing the research about something to see if I find things that I wouldn't be able to figure out for myself. Reading those reviews can take an entire day, for sure. There can be a lot of reading. But they usually do turn up important information. Usually they take less than that. Usually I have a headphone early enough where there's not that many comments on it, but I think it's important that I do that research. So now I have a document with the header on top, a big space, and then notes from the manual, notes about user notes where we have potentially some reliability issues, and then notes from all my listening tests. Then I go take photos of the product, and I make a PDF from the Excel file of the measurements and bring it over to my computer, and then I make an image, and then I resize and Photoshop the images so they're the right color. And now I have all the raw materials from which to write the review. Often, as I write the review, I have to go back and take another photo. There may be a detail or something like that that needs to be seen a little bit better. So as I write, I'll often have to go take another photo. The first paragraph is the hardest. You got to set the stage. You kind of got to know what you're going to say in the end from the beginning. And at this point, I kind of know what I'm going to say at the end from the beginning. But that first paragraph, boy, that can take a while. You just really want something that's spanky. You want to be interesting for the reader, and it's tricky. I don't know if I pull it off all the time, but I try anyway. So after I get that first paragraph down pat, then it's just a matter of going through the steps. Describing the product, really it boils down to the styling, because that's right off the bat pretty obvious. Then the build quality and the materials in the build quality. Then the comfort of the headphone. And that's really the whole first page. That really pretty much takes care of the whole first page. There may be some additional notes, oddities, wind whistling in the thing, or the cables that get stiff when it's cold. But pretty much I can get the whole first page done after the initial paragraph fairly quickly. So as I write, going down this first page, I keep looking at my notes, and every time I use that note at the top of the page or in the body of the article, I'll erase the note at the bottom of the page. So I get to the bottom of the first page, and I'm ready to push the button, and well, not really push the button, but ready to mentally switch the page and start writing about sound quality. I use my notes here again as I go along. And this is really the acid test, because using my notes, I'll go back and recheck what I said in my notes. I'll listen again as I'm writing and check what I said in my notes, that's still true in my mind. It's sort of the acid test. As I write about a product, this is kind of a subtle thing, and I don't know if people have noticed it, but I'm very specific. I tend to write the same words in terms of expressing a magnitude with words. I'm very specific about words like a tad and a bit and modestly or some, markedly, remarkably. Those are all very, very consciously I'm thinking about the magnitude of how big this problem is. And if I say a bit, I mean a bit. If I say it's a bit bright, don't put it in your head that, oh my gosh, this is a bright headphone. No, it's just a bit bright. Or a tad, well, that's less than a bit. So pay attention to those things because I'm not just throwing words out there that came off the top of my head. I've got a very specific set. As I write about sound quality and using my notes from the bottom of the page and comparing them, when I'm done with that part, I'll erase the note at the bottom of the page. Once the bulk of the article is done, I've finished the physical product evaluation and the sound quality part of the product evaluation. Of course, there's things that sound quality in wireless mode or sound quality with noise canceling on. But anyway, I finished that part of the article. Then the bulk of the article is done. And once that happens, I'll scroll down to the bottom of the page again to look for notes. And if there's any notes left, I'll go, oh, I forgot that. And I'll go up and put that note in the right place. Then I go take a shower and put on a Hawaiian shirt. Then I'm fresh. I've had my shower. I've had a little mental break. I go back and I edit the article. I go through the entire thing, and then I write the summary of the article. Then I have to get to the point where I recommend the product or not. If I don't recommend the product, I send, after the review is done, I send the manufacturer an email that says, my review is up, here's the link, please send me a label, and I'll get the product sent back to you. If it gets a Stuff We Like sticker, then I'll email the manufacturer, let them know the review is up, include a link, let them know if they want me to hang on to the product, I'll be glad to do so, because it might get referred to in the future if I have it as a comparison product, but they're certainly welcome to ask for it back. And if it gets a Wall of Fame sticker, I email the manufacturer, tell them where give them a link to the article and say, I really need to hold on to this product because it's now a reference for me, and I'll let you know when it becomes superseded, and then I'll get it back to you, but I'd like to have it permanently on the Wall of Fame so I can use it as a reference in the future. And then, with a nice, fresh thought of what I wrote and what I wrote in the summary, I'll go into this room and I'll do the video. And I'll usually do it in one take, but it's nice and fresh in my mind. So usually it's pretty easy to do the video, pretty easy to cover most of what I covered in the article because it's brand fresh in my head. And then I take my memory card to my MacBook and I make the video. I do it in iMovie. It's very simple. It's fairly straightforward. And then I render it and upload it into YouTube. And of course, the rendering process and the uploading it to YouTube take quite a while. It's maybe between the two of them an hour, let's say. It kind of depends on the length of the movie. The rendering is pretty quick, 15, 20 minutes, but uploading it to YouTube can sometimes take 40 minutes to an hour. So I've got some time. And at that point, I start filling in the resources section. And in the resources section, I go back to the window I have open with all the tabs, and I create the links to the home page and the product page and the manual and the links to all the threads on HeadFi or on Superbest Audio Friends. And as I do that, I just delete the tabs on the page and keep track of any other tabs that are open here, anything else, other resources that people need. Maybe I actually have to point towards some of the Amazon reviews or something, but I get the resources section done. And I also write the measurement section while the video is being uploaded. The measurement section actually is the easiest section for me to write. I can pretty much blast right through it because I do spend so much time looking at measurements. Basically, I just write down what's in my head as I look at every graph, and it's pretty straightforward. The thing is, I have to write that measurement section at the end because then I can relate the measurements a little bit to what I said in the article and the sound impressions. And I'll mention, I really didn't hear it that strongly, or I heard it more strongly than what it measured. So that's in the measurement section is where I compare the subjective impression to what the measurements look like. By the time I'm done with the measurements section, everything's uploaded and ready to go. At that point, it's just a matter of pushing 200 buttons or so in the right sequence, getting everything all loaded into place and moving it onto the tool on Interfidelity, and writing in the little text for the YouTube channel. I get to the point where the review is up on Interfidelity, and I go to the first page and create the link in YouTube back to the Interfidelity page, and then I push 2 buttons to make the Interfidelity post go live, to publish it, and to publish the YouTube video and make it public, and voila, I have a new Interfidelity review. And then I start all over again the next week. Thank you so much for coming along with the ride. I really appreciate it when you guys read my reviews. I work pretty hard on it. It's a busy week, and there's all sorts of shipping boxes and stuff in there as well, but it's very satisfying to know that you guys read my reviews and trust what I say, and at least to the extent that you're willing to go out and check things out when I say it's worth checking things out. So that makes it all worth it. Thanks. See you next time. Then I review. Then I re. That's going to be an awkward ending on that one.